We need more seats? Yeah, we bring chairs. Do y'all need help? I think they're... I agree.
Alright guys, we're going to squeeze this right in here, if that's okay.
Actually, I don't want anyone. This one back is there. We're like, these missionaries that put the stuff like that. So we have X, say Y, Alright, if I can grab everyone's attention real quick. Sweet. If everyone like quiet down so I can just talk for like 5 minutes. Alright, so I just want to welcome everyone out to tonight's debate. It's a great turnout. I'm glad everyone could be here. We got some great topics we're going to talk about tonight. So my name is Sean Ward, by the way. I'm the chairman of Young Americans for Freedom here at the Madison Liberty Institute. Just a brief word about what our organization is. So we're a conservative activist organization. We do different projects and we go to different events throughout the year. This semester we've traveled to Washington, D.C. and to North Carolina to receive training and to build networks with other conservative students. Some projects we do, you may have seen us on the street corners. Like we had a giant sign that said, "I'm pro-life," changed my mind. We had another one that said, "Build the wall," to advocate for border security. But basically what we do, we meet here in this room every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And we talk about current political issues, different solutions that we may have to those issues. And if you're worried about like, hey, I'm not too educated, it's like completely okay. Like it's a great environment to make friends and talk about politics. So that's just my 2 cents about YAF. I'm going to turn the time over to Maxwell, who is the chairman of Progressive Student Society, and then a quick word from Brooklyn, who is here representing the Madison Liberty Institute.
Where's my wallet, you guys? Who took my wallet?
Alright, so if you can shed the floor to Maxwell.
We're Progressive Student Society. We're actually a very recent group here. I don't believe Rexburg has had a left-leaning students group since College Democrats, which was dissolved here a number of years ago. But Riggs College actually has a really good history of debate and of representation from both student groups. The Mannering Center used to, a few decades ago, host debates every week on a variety of topics, and so this is continuing a proud tradition for Rexburg and for BYUI Idaho. We meet every week, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. in the Ridge Clubhouse, which is not as fancy as this building, but like I said, we're recent and we're definitely smaller than any of these organizations.
And we encourage anyone, whether you are left-leaning or not, I know most people aren't, to come to our group and learn what we're about. We have like nothing personal about politics, like no hard feelings regardless about whatever your political views are, because politics should be personal and this debate I know is all in good spirit, we're all friends. But we just think that political discourse is important, and especially hearing perspectives that you might not hear always. So we just hope that you will listen to things that we have to say tonight, even if they are not often heard, and be respectful of that. And we're just really happy to be here. Oh, also, our main like means of communication, we don't have like a booth or like any like stickers or anything out there, but you can follow us on Instagram at Progressive Students Rexburg. Yeah, we'll write it afterwards. We'll put it on the whiteboard afterwards, but it's Progressive Students Rexburg, and if you follow that, we'll have updates about meetings. We meet again, like you said, every week, 5 on Tuesdays at the Ridge Women's Clubhouse. And we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the debate.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, guys, I think this is the most people we've ever had in this basement right here. This is awesome. I'm so happy to see all of you guys here. My name is Brooklyn Raymond. I'm with the Madison Liberty Institute. This is the organization that you guys are meeting in right now. We basically are an organization that sponsors political discourse and kind of discussion like this. We are just kind of the house for YAF, so if you kind of are wondering, we just sponsor them underneath. So we have different student clubs. We've got Young Americans for Freedom, Students for Liberty, Turning Point USA. We've got tons of different groups. So if you're interested in kind of continuing doing things like this, then definitely come back. Come look us up, our website, madisonliberty.org. We have lots of fun events. We have speakers. We had Will Witt come out last semester, for any of you who know him. We just do lots of events. So if you guys are interested in stuff like this, we really encourage you to come and be involved with us. Thank you.
Cool. Cool. You guys want to come in? That way. Okay, so if I can grab everyone's second attention for one more second before we get started. Just a couple quick announcements. In the room right over there, we have pizza for sale for $1.50 a slice. And there's a bunch of stuff on the table, like buttons, stickers, pamphlets. Please take all that stuff. That's stuff from our group, the Young Americans for Freedom. And there's t-shirts there too. They're $10 a piece. My main man, Brendan, is out there, and he's selling stuff. So please go get some stuff. There's a lot of free stuff that you can decorate your laptop with and such. So just one word before we start. Since we're recording, please keep it down to please be really quiet. And if you do need to talk, just whisper. That way we can also hear the people who are debating. And try not too much get in front of the cameras of you. That way we have a clear shot. Just a couple more rules. If you hear something you like, go ahead and clap, but it shouldn't be too excessive. That way it distracts the debaters. But if just a very light applause if needed, but try to stray away from that as much as possible. Okay, snaps. That's what they want. Are there any questions before we get started? All right. So I'd like to invite up the team who is doing gun control to come up to the stand here. Woo!
You guys want to coordinate that, or?
That's your name? All right, everyone can quiet down so we can get started. Appreciate it. Thank you. And then I'll turn the time over to our moderator, Nick.
Yep. So you guys have 1 minute for opening arguments, and then I'll stop you, pose a question, and then you'll have a good 18 minutes to debate. So let's flip a coin and find out. Heads or tails?
Heads.
Okay. This is my first coin flip in a really long time. Heads.
Okay.
So you guys will
Start
start.
when the timer starts.
Yep. A minute.
All right. So today's debate on gun control is a question of freedom. As our founders knew, we were endowed with certain inalienable rights by our Creator, and they also wrote the Constitution with the correct understanding of human nature, that there are always evil people, that there will always be people who seek to do harm, that there will always be tyrants who seek to reign with horror and bloodshed. And that is what the Second Amendment is about. The U.S. has more guns than any country, with a homicide and violent crime rate that's been decreasing for years. There's no good reason to infringe upon your right or my right to protect ourselves, our family, our friends, and others. The government can't do everything for us. When there's an attempted murder, assault, rape, theft in progress, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. I'm an opponent of gun control because I am pro-freedom, because I am pro-choice, because I am pro-life, because I am pro-woman, and I am pro-safety. Woo-hoo! I love America, the land of the free. The land of the free because when Britain said obey and comply, our guns said no.
Amen.
We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in our society, the life free of violence and fear. It's because we agree with the words of Nelson Mandela that we stand in firm affirmation of the resolution that in the United States an increase in gun control would decrease gun violence. In this debate, the paramount value is human life. Without life, nothing else is possible, so it must come first. In the United States, there have been 152 mass shootings. That is more than any other country. Something needs to be done about America's gun problem. Stricter policies regarding background checks, licensing, magazines, and assault weapons, future manufacturing of assault weapons, and what my partner and I are going to be advocating for today. The winner of this debate will be the team that more effectively solves gun violence in order to protect and increase the quality of human life in the United States.
Alright, so they're debating the question, is gun control an effective solution to gun violence? You have 18 minutes starting now.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to define a couple of terms.
Yeah.
Please define the term assault weapon.
Alright, so I'm going to use the definition from the U.S. Department of Justice. In general, assault weapons are semi-automatic firearms with a large magazine of ammunition that were designed and configured for rapid fire and combat use.
Okay. And what would be a large capacity magazine?
So there's like, are you talking about for a specific type of weapon, or like, so on an assault?
No, I suppose the question is there an actual definition for a
Well,
large capacity magazine?
Right, so the definition I would use for like a rifle, or for really anything, is anything over 10 rounds would be high capacity.
Okay, and how did you arrive at that number, 10 rounds?
The main point we're going to be focusing on is if it's semi-automatic.
Okay,
semi-automatic is the definition.
What is a semi-automatic weapon?
A weapon in which you don't have to cock it manually, where you press the trigger and each trigger pull is a shot.
So, like 80% of all firearms in the United
Correct.
States.
Yeah.
So, rifles, most revolvers,
Right.
all pistols, all semi-automatic pistols. So pretty much anything that is not either a bolt action or a lever action.
Correct, because it is so effective at killing people. It's designed for combat. It's not designed for self-defense.
Okay, first of all, I would be really interested to know the last time a guy went into combat with a lever action rifle. Second of all,
That's what we're
We're
saying.
saying the lever action that you're talking about is not
oh,
designed for
I'm
combat.
sorry, I misheard that.
Yeah.
To say that these are more effective tools for killing, I would say yes. That's why we use them for, we give them to police. That's why we give them to...
We're not against giving it to police. We're only talking about civilian use.
I was getting to that.
Okay.
Why would we ever want to give civilians a less effective tool for self-defense?
Okay, give me a circumstance in which you would need a semi-automatic weapon over a manual weapon in self-defense.
Simple.
As a civilian.
Yes, there was an incident in Texas about 3 years ago when a guy's home was invaded by 3 separate criminals, all armed.
Did these gunmen have semi-automatic weapons as well?
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the issue.
So how are you going to keep these weapons out of the hands of criminals?
So the United States has banned automatic weapons very effectively. Those are not seen, like you're talking about, most of the guns are semi-automatic because of the automatic weapon ban. So the United States has proven that they are effective at banning certain types of guns. The only reason that hasn't been done before, in fact the Brady Bill, which was passed in 1994, did ban semi-automatic guns, but there were too many loopholes and so it didn't work. If you were to close those loopholes, then we would see the same results as what we've seen with the automatic weapon ban. So we just need to transfer what we've done with automatic weapons over to semi-automatic as well.
I'd also like to address the question of when would an American citizen need any of these, assault rifles or any of these, guns that you're talking about banning. Well, as we discussed previously, that the point of the Second Amendment, in addition to self-defense, was primarily for the defense and the prevention of tyranny. If we look through history, and so the problem is that the United States, again, maybe not in our lifetime, maybe that's 50 years down the road, maybe that's 100 years down the road, who knows, but it could go tyrannical. History is replete with democracies going tyrannical. There was Spain in the 20th century taken over by Franco the dictator. There was France in the 19th century with Napoleon taking control. There was Italy, Benito Mussolini becoming the fascist dictator. Germany, 20th century, Nazi rule, Hitler.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Under what circumstance would a semi-automatic handgun be a deterrent against a government that has access to nuclear weapons?
Well, first of all, there's the Bundy-Clive standoff. Now, I'll admit, I don't know all the details behind that, and I don't know whether I agree with the stance that he took or not, but it shows that people with guns can stand up to the government. I mean, look at Vietnam, farmers with guns standing up to the United States Army. Individuals with guns can stand up to tyranny, and that's why people in Germany back in last century are now a pile of ashes. A bunch of Jews bunch of homosexual people, a bunch of gypsies. That's why they're
Because
a
they
pile of
didn't
ashes.
have semi-automatic handguns?
Yeah, because they didn't have appropriate, because Hitler, he disarmed them, Stalin disarmed his people, Mao disarmed his people, and those people are now the millions dead.
Okay, so once again, we're not talking about disarming civilians. This is only semi-automatic weapons, assault weapons, weapons designed for combat. Civilians are not going into combat. Do they need self-defense? Yes. Semi-automatic weapons are not designed for self-defense. They're designed for combat.
And in the immediate instance of a robber coming through your door with, say, with a weapon, what would you define that? Would that be a peaceful incident? Or would that be a violent incident of combat in that moment?
In which you could use a gun, for sure. I'm in favor of more people having guns. I think it's a crime deterrent. I think it's a rape deterrent. But there's no reason to allow these assault weapons, which are designed for combat, designed to efficiently kill children. There's no reason for those to be used by civilians. Now, can I ask a question?
No, it's interesting that you use that emotionally loaded term, used to kill children. Because you know how many assault weapons, quote unquote, because that's a term that I'll get into later, you know how many mass shootings have actually involved a semi-automatic rifle?
Actually, 3 out of 10 of the worst mass shootings in modern American history have carried out with a semi-automatic assault weapon.
3 out of 10.
Yeah.
What about
Of
the others?
In modern history, 3 of the 10 worst mass shootings have been used with semi-automatic.
Okay, but would that be
That's just in
semi-automatic
the
rifles
past- that's just
or
in the
just
past year.
semi-automatics in
Just
general?
last year, 3 out of 10 of the worst mass shootings have been carried out with a semi-automatic weapon.
Yeah,
Okay.
That was in the past year. And then you asked about the emotional loaded nature of the question about the children. That brings it to, the reason why we're really passionate about this issue is because of our school children that are dying in these shootings. And this is something we're really passionate about. Since Columbine, there's been 85 school shootings. A vast majority of these, over 70% of these, have been committed with a semi-automatic weapon, leaving 223 children dead, with 19 being that median age of students and also faculty that are being killed in these shootings. And this is why it's not a question of disarming and making the American public more vulnerable to a tyrannical government. That's not what this is about. This is about protecting the lives of our children and our loved ones and our family and everyone. It's about protecting Democrats and Republicans. It's about protecting human lives.
And I agree with that and the fact that we're about protecting lives, because I don't think any of us are under the delusion that any of us are for killing more people. We may disagree on the subject of how we obtain greater safety and security. So I don't want to impose that imply anyone here wants more people dying. I don't believe that. But the problem with your argument here is that mass shootings are a statistical outlier. So according to Vox.com, it's important to note that there's not one universally accepted definition of what constitutes a mass shooting. On the whole, regardless differences in classification, deaths from mass shooting make up a small fraction of deaths from gun violence. The CDC and Prevention estimated that in 2013 alone, that 33,000 people died from firearm deaths. But looking at the 2013 data from the mass shooting tracker, only 502 of those deaths, or 1.5%, were connected to mass shootings. And it's notable to...
One mass shooting is more than what we should have. There should be 0.
I agree with that.
That's your definition of mass shooting.
I'll get into that. So it's noted, so the 1.5%, that's including everything. Now most standards of mass shooting is, again, because there's no one universal definition, most people go along with the definition that it's 4 or more deaths. That excludes gang violence, that excludes domestic violence, that excludes terrorism. And so this 1.5% of firearm deaths, that's the most generous percentage that you could give to that death. As a statistical outlier, it's shown that the lifetime odds of dying in a mass shooting is 1 in 11,125. And to compare that with some other things to give you an idea.
The fact that America has way more mass shootings than any other country, not just developed country, any other country. How do you respond to that?
I would respond that other countries do not track mass shootings the way we do.
Okay. How do they track them? What is their criteria?
For example, when was the last time you heard about a mass shooting of Christians in Nigeria? Never. Several happened this last week.
I think
we don't hear about those because other countries don't track them. And they certainly do not get the kind of media coverage that every single
Those
mass
countries
shooting
aren't
does in this
developed.
country.
Those countries aren't developed like America,
Okay, so-
United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, all these developed countries. And while America experiences more statistics that is thrown out a lot is the fact that America doesn't have nearly as many mass shootings as these underdeveloped countries, like you're saying. But as Americans, and we're living in a very very developed and technologically advanced society, a society where we have the common sense to enact and elect leaders that will write into place these common sense gun laws that will prevent these shootings. And despite the fact that we are living in a democracy, we still experience more mass shootings proportionally and numerically, but also proportionally than any other developed country.
So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, because I agree that it's unfair to compare developed with undeveloped countries, it's an unfair comparison. Also, what is an unfair comparison is, again, that generous 1.5% of mass shootings being compared with the rest of shooting deaths. The fact that we're comparing that 1.5% with the rest to make effective policy to cover the vast majority of gun deaths, to take the exception and to make a rule for everything else on that doesn't make sense. And that still doesn't account for, again, the idea that we have to prevent tyranny from happening. You're talking about you don't want a tyranny. I don't think that you do. But how do you prevent a tyranny if the citizenry isn't armed? How do you prevent that?
Through checks and balances, through education, through checks and balances, through education, through knowing when the red flags are happening, through learning about history, through making sure that we're sticking to the Constitution.
You talk about
We are not going to be able to stop, if the American government were to go tyrannical, we would need to, that's the reason we have checks and balances in now.
What's the checks and balances doing for the executive orders?
We are not going to be able to stop the American government when they have access to the most funded military in the entire world.
What about the constitutional overreach that we see every day? We look at the 10th Amendment, and the 10th Amendment states that any of the powers...
Okay, then fight against that. Then that's what you need to focus on. Then stop that.
I would argue that our ultimate check and balance, I would argue that our ultimate check and balance is the fact that we are armed as a citizenry.
That's the ultimate check and balance.
Yes.
That's not what it talks about. The Constitution talks about the virtue of the people being the ultimate check and balance, not the armed nature of its citizens. It's the virtue, it's the goodness. And
That's what we can hope, yes.
And of course, we don't, like you opened with your thoughts, that there will always be evil people, and there have always been evil people. And proponents of no gun, or lesser gun laws, and supporters of the Second Amendment argue that very often, and they say that that gun control is just a way to strip that freedom, but and that gun violence isn't a gun problem, it's a person problem, and while that is true, that does not account for the fact that it's a lot harder to kill a lot of people if you don't have a semi-automatic weapon.
I still am not understanding how you account for, again, you say, why don't you fight against those breaches of the Constitution, and I'm all for that. You know, that's what I want to spend my life doing, but the problem becomes, once the government becomes past the point where the people have their sovereignty, where they're not able to have a say, you know, once, again, like Napoleon staging a coup or any other dictator coming to power, once that gets to that point where the citizenry doesn't have a capacity through democratic means to turn that about, where's our mean of resistance to that? The only thing I'm seeing is guns. At a certain point, again, that's why millions of people are dead, because they didn't have guns. And I'm not convinced that, you know, legislation alone, minus the citizenry's lack of guns, could ever prevent that tyranny.
You have 5 minutes left, so
All right.
wrap up your argument.
A couple of final points here. You say that semi-automatic weapons, and just as a quick definition, a semi-automatic is one trigger pull, one shot. Pretty much every rifle, pretty much every pistol falls into this category. But you say that semi-automatics make it easier to kill people. They also make it easier to defend yourself. In addition, in countries where there are almost no guns whatsoever, there are still mass killings. There was an incident in
Oh, in
Japan
Australia,
where there
when
was a
they-
mass stabbing where 19 people were killed because nobody was able to defend themselves until the police came along.
In Australia,
In China,
after they-
33 people were
after
killed
they
by a
passed-
team of people
Okay.
who were acting in coordination, who were able to, again, they were able to kill 33 people
Right.
with knives.
Okay, so you mentioned other countries and how there's no evidence. In 1996, when Australia...
I never said there was no evidence.
Okay, well, it has happened in Australia in 1996. The rates of gun violence has gone down by more than 50% since they passed semi-automatic weapons.
I agree with you that Australia has seen a decrease after they passed the 1996 arms ban, but what he hasn't mentioned here is that Australia had had a continuing decrease prior to the gun legislation of decreasing homicide, decreasing violent crime, and after the legislation was passed, there was no significant change in that rate of decrease. Essentially, the projected rate of violent crime and homicide stayed the same after that legislation was passed, showing that there was no effect of that legislation. And the UK showed similar laws. In 96, when they had the gun ban, in 96 in UK, they saw, again, from 1995 to 1999, 2 years before to 2 years after the gun ban, there was a 42% decrease in licensed firearm owners and a 33% increase in crimes with firearms, and there was a 41% increase in violent crimes. And so I'm seeing a correlation between them taking away the guns and people being disarmed, and that deterrent that we're talking about, a deterrent to tyranny, a deterrent to evildoers. They saw that deterrent was gone, and they saw their chance. Rapes went up, thefts went up, burglary, murder, everything under the sun went up.
Okay, you're disregarding the fact that Bennett made at the beginning of our debate. We are for the lawful use of firearms for self-defense. We are not for disarming the American people. I'll say that again. We are for the prohibiting assault weapons, weapons that are meant to assault and attack.
Yeah, attack from someone who wants to do you harm.
Okay, can I make one point? You guys are talking about how assault weapons they make it easier to defend yourself, right? So
Yes.
we haven't mentioned some other aspects of assault weapons. We've only talked about how easy it is to shoot. What about the fact that the pistol grips, right? The pistol grips on these assault weapons.
So?
You can't burn yourself shooting multiple rounds up. How does that is appealing to a serial killer or to a mass shooter. That's
And
not
to
appealing
just
someone.
anybody who's using a gun who doesn't
How
want to
is
burn
that
himself.
a crime deterrent to be able
okay.
to shoot off multiple rounds?
Just
Under
real
what
quick, real quick.
circumstance are you shooting off hundreds of rounds?
In a practical
On,
purpose.
Yeah,
In a
practical
yes.
on any day at the range, I've spent like
That's not
500
practical,
rounds.
that's
How is
recreation.
that self-defense?
Okay, practical. Let's address
recreation.
it. Let's address the practical. So, when
That's recreation.
again,
How's that not
again,
practical?
potential tyranny, when the Nazis come to take the Jews from your attics, again, it sounds like a joke, but back in the 40s, when the Nazi regime was there, that would have been very effective for getting a Nazi off your front porch. Again,
A lot of these mass shooters spend hours and hours at the range perfecting their aim and perfecting the way they shoot these guns.
So do I.
And I'm not saying you're a mass shooter, but I'm just saying that that's not practical, that's recreational. And
Okay,
this
so
needs
quick
to-
question. Do either of you have any practical experience with the semi-automatic weapons?
Absolutely, I've shot guns a lot.
Yes,
I've
but
shot semi-automatic guns.
Have you shot the fabled AR-15?
I've shot, yeah, a lot. I'm from Alaska.
Okay.
Even if he hadn't, that's irrelevant. That doesn't affect his logic. What we're saying
Okay,
is that there's
that's
no...
It's fun. It's
there's-
fun to shoot these guns. I understand the appeal, and I understand.
Do you know the appeal of the AR-15 for me personally?
Go ahead.
It's lighter weight. The pistol grip makes it slightly easier for me to use because I have short little T-Rex arms. The adjustable stock, which is apparently an evil thing too, makes it easier for me to use because again, short
That's
little
time.
T-Rex arms.
18 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, just wrap up with your thought and then
Yeah.
go into closing statements.
The point is that current gun bans are focused on punishing the law-abiding. And the gun bans which are focused on cosmetic features like like the barrel shroud, like the pistol grip, like the adjustable stock, like the muzzle brake, like the flash hider, all these things are based on cosmetic features which have little to nothing to do with the actual function of the firearm or its supposed killing ability.
All right. So just to close here, this past weekend, Sydney Ilo is a 19-year-old, and she was a survivor of the Stoneman Douglas shooting on February 14th last year. She killed herself this weekend due to survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress. Her classmate Delaney Tarr issued a statement in a speech recently saying, this movement to increase gun control, and I'd say our movement as well, created by students, led by students, is based on emotion. It is based on passion, and it is based on pain. Our biggest flaws, our tendency to be a bit too aggressive, our tendency to lash out, things that you expect from a normal teenager, these are our strengths. The only reason that we've gotten so far is that we are not afraid of losing money. We're not afraid of getting reelected or not getting reelected. We have nothing to lose. The only thing we have to gain at this point is our safety. And I'd say that's what this is all about.
Thank you. Next group.
Is that closing statement? Or?
Closing statement
Yeah,
as well.
okay. As Americans, the most important thing to keep in mind is that we hear a lot about the safety of society, about helping to make sure that the greater good is propelled forward. But the smallest unit of any society is the individual. And our individual rights are the most important things that we can safeguard. Our individual right to speech and to self-protection, among others. I do not think that any law propelled by emotion and not by fact and not by reality is ever going to be for the good of the United States or its people at any level. I would say that it is our individual responsibility to use our rights properly, including the right to firearms ownership, and to safeguard ourselves against those who would do us harm at every level. And disarming ourselves as a nation and as individuals is not going to make anyone safer.
All right, let's give a round of applause. All right, if the illegal immigration team wants to come up, that'd be perfect.
Let's get this right, boys.
Got this? Got this? All right, if I can call everyone back together, if you can quiet down, so we can get started. Quiet everyone down. All right, so I'd just like to turn the time over to the moderator to begin the discussion.
All right. So, like the last one, you'll each have a minute to present opening arguments, and then you'll have 18 minutes after that to debate. When I give the 5-minute warning, please begin wrapping up and starting closing statements. You can close in a timely manner. So, we'll start with the progressive students, since YAF started before. And your minute starts now.
We do not want the border wall to be built because we believe there are resources and opportunities in the current system that are broken. Attaining the property and spending the money on building the wall would be better spent on repairing policy and regulations at the border. Time and time again, we have seen that strengthening the border has not prevented immigration or the trafficking of drugs. We believe immigrants make America great, and we should have a comprehensive system in place to include them.
So just to clarify, we're not advocating pro-illegal immigration, but rather immigration reform different than strengthening the borders in ways that have been proposed by Trump and the conservative administration currently, such as